Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Derrick Fernandez. This afternoon, we're going to do a webinar on streamlining the BIM process for healthcare. If you have any questions during the webinar, please feel free to type them into the chat or questions area of the webinar. And at the very end, we'll take some time to go through those questions and get you guys some answers. Okay, let's get started. Healthcare projects typically contain extensive and complex programs that can quickly become unmanageable and a hassle to modify. As a community, we typically use Word, Excel, or some other type of database to record and maintain these programs. Because of the nature, it is almost impossible to be precise and error-free during these tasks. It is also a time-extensive job when you want to make global changes throughout. The intent of this webinar is to give you some of the ways in which Affinity can help with these project tasks and improve the efficiency in your workflow. Ultimately, this will streamline your process, saving you time and money on each project. I mentioned a second ago how we use different tasks to do our different tasks throughout the process of architecture. The problem with this is that our way of recording information now does not communicate with our schematic design tools, our documentation tools, or even our facility management tools. That's where Affinity differs. Affinity is more like an integration hub. We can actually collect as much or as little information and actually pass that on to different aspects that you have to accomplish throughout your process. So if you have to pull in information from a schematic design tool like Sketchup or Rhino, or if you have to pass information into a production software like Revit or ArchiCAD or EcoSim, or even into a facilities management tool, Affinity is that hub that actually communicates with all these different tools so that information can be transferred without having any data drops throughout the process. For the newcomers to Affinity, the people who haven't really experienced Affinity, know much about Affinity, I'm going to quickly go through and describe what Affinity is and how it works. And then we'll get into the tips and tricks for healthcare projects. Affinity has different models within it. There's a programming aspect where we can, pull in as much program information as we need for our projects. The program actually has a hierarchy, so there's departments, sub-departments, and then sub-sub-departments. So however we actually create our program, that's the way it's actually viewed within Affinity. It's not just a list of rooms, it's actually a hierarchy to the programming. And we'll see that once we get into the software. The program could be viewed different ways, from spreadsheets to relationship diagrams, and it could be exported or printed on reports to share with your clients. The second part of Affinity is the design aspect of it. Affinity has a design aspect where we can actually drag from our program, our original program, into the design to create space plans. The space plans can be modified. They don't have to match exactly what the program has written. The design can be, however you want to create it. We don't want to restrict your design, so we give you the ability to create custom shapes, sizes, even though your program might require a different size or aspect. Ultimately, that program and design will be validated through Affinity. That's where our design validation comes into play. Affinity will quickly highlight and give you warnings of where your program and design don't meet or where they differ. And then the fourth aspect is our BIM integration. We talked about that a little earlier when I talked about the different tools that we communicate with. Something that you need to really realize is that we're not just a one-time push into your production software or your facilities management software. or actually a bidirectional link, so that you can push information back and forth between the two. All right. All right. Now that you have the the background of how Affinity works, let's go into Affinity and view some of the tips for healthcare programming. I'm actually going to start a new project. To give you an example of some of the information that could be saved into your templates. When this project opens up, we'll see that it has a full program already created. This program is saved into my hospital template so that it automatically is created every time I start a new project using this template. The purpose of this is so that you don't have to recreate information. You don't have to recreate an entire program every time you do a new project. You can actually pull information from previous projects to save you time during this process. You'll notice that there's major departments, even sub-departments, and then within that you have your individual spaces with sizes, unit areas, and even grossing factors applied to those departments. So this is just an example of how information from one project was saved to a template and now can be reused on a second project. We can quickly go into this program and manipulate either unit sizes or quantities for this particular project. All right. A big issue with using, like, let's say Excel for programming is that you don't have the ability to globally change information throughout your entire program. So, for instance, this program is almost 300,000 square feet. It's over 1,400 rooms within the program, and they're broken into many departments. I could quickly show you all of the departments within each department. There's sub-departments and sub-sub-departments. So this is a fairly extensive program that's broken up into many aspects of the project. Affinity actually gives you the ability to do global changes throughout your entire project by changing the space type and then applying that to your program. So, for example, let's say I go to my housekeeping closet in my library. I can come here, manipulate the size of this room. So I'm going to change it to be 8 by 10. This is ultimately changing the entire size of that space type. Actually, I'll do the electrical closet also. So I'll do a couple so we can do mass changes. Okay, so I changed this one to be a little smaller. I changed the housekeeping to be a little bigger. And now what I'm going to do is actually go into my program and say apply those changes to all of those items within my program. So I'm going to come in here, run a script, and say update program sizes from my template. I'm going to select those two rooms and say OK. And what it did is it went through and changed the size of the closet. It found it 8 times throughout my program, and then it found the housekeeping 13 times throughout my program. So now when I go to those individual items in my program, the size has changed throughout the entire program. So I can come down here, found housekeeping, it's 80. Electrical is 50. So throughout my entire program, I just changed the unit size of those rooms, which ultimately updates my entire program in the calculations for the total square footage of this program. All right. Affinity also gives you the ability to save departments or even sub-departments to the template. I'm going to pull up the template editor so that you can see some of the groups or the departments that are saved. For instance, is patient care. I can actually save that department into my template with the spaces, the unit sizes, and if I want, I can actually blank out the quantities so that I can input that information as I create my project. So there's also patient care support, some staff support spaces. So now, instead of starting a project with a full, complete program, I can actually start to create my program from scratch. So I'll give you an example of that. I'm going to create a new department. I'll just do an ICU department. And I'm going to open this in its own tab so that we don't get confused by the rest of the program. Now, when I add the sub-departments to this, I can actually pick from what's saved in my template. So I'll add patient care. I'll add the patient care support. And I'll add staff support. All right, so I've just added, 3 sub-departments to this ICU department. In this situation, I've blanked out all of my quantities, so I can actually add that information in as I'm doing my program. For people who do have Affinity, there's actually a new tool that we've added where a room can be sized based off the objects within that room. For example, this business center, if I show you how it's created, there's now a fit to content checkbox. And what this does is actually gives you the ability to input the equipment and furniture and have that equipment and furniture size your room. So while you're sitting down with your client, you can actually go through and say, I need 4 of those workstations, 2 pharmacist workstations, 1 traveler or 2 travelers, maybe 3 copy fax, and 5 file storage. So I've decided to, put quantities of these objects. Now when I refresh, the size of my business center is based off the size of the furniture or equipment within that room. And then from there, I could specify how many of these rooms I need. So maybe I need 3 of these rooms in my program. Maybe I need 4 nourishment centers. So you can actually sit down with your client and fill out this program information and quickly show them the results of what they're adding to their project in real time. So you don't have to go back to the office, crunch the numbers, send them a document so that they can see what their decisions were. You can actually sit down with them, show them those decisions in real time so that they can see what they're adding and how that really affects their overall program and their needs. Another thing that Affinity allows you to do is, just now I showed you how you can add those quantities of items to size the room. Affinity also gives you the ability to create equipment or furniture list from scratch. So for this business center, I actually have as components all of the equipment and furniture that I want within this room. So I haven't physically placed it. I've just created this equipment list for the production team to use as they're starting to do their documentation. If you don't do just a list, some people prefer to actually lay out what the room looks like. So if I look at, this patient room, I've actually laid out my equipment, including my beds, my furniture, and rooms within that room. So if I have a restroom inside of that room and all of the fixtures within that restroom. So you can actually start to create the layouts or the space types save those to your template so that they could be reused on projects in the future. So you'll have that information to reuse over and over again on projects. All right. Once again, if you guys have any questions, be sure to type them into the chat or questions area, and I'll be sure to get to them at the end of this presentation. Okay. All right, the next aspect that I'm going to discuss is the design aspect of Affinity. Since healthcare, programs tend to be so big, it's really common that they aren't necessarily all related to one building. Affinity gives you the ability to create multiple buildings within one project file so that you can actually start to do your space planning and your schematic design within your one Affinity file rather than creating multiple files to do your separate buildings. Affinity uses the drag and drop method to create the design. So once you create your buildings and your stories, all you do is go to your program navigation and drag those rooms into your design, and they'll come in with all of the information that you've already decided in your programming phase as you're starting to create your schematic design. So you can start to align these, create your corridors and your circulation spaces, and ultimately create space plans that can be either passed to your production tool or used to, do crit pits or whatever you need to do with them. I'm going to switch over to a file that has a design already created. So I used that same program and I started laying out, my patient rooms and all of my other spaces to create, a design, the first story of this building. Affinity, once again, doesn't restrict design. We want you to be able to create whatever you want to. So if you want to add curves to spaces or overlap spaces or cut spaces, you have that ability using our design tools. You're not restricted to just squares and rectangles. You can pretty much create any shape or form that you need to within Affinity. If you guys didn't see the webinar that we gave a couple weeks ago, I recommend you go and download it. It talks more about the design aspect of Affinity and creating conceptual design within Affinity and outside of Affinity, and bringing that information in so that ultimately it can be compared to your original program. Because Affinity is created with that separate programming aspect and design aspect, it automatically does your validation for you. So in this example where I have a design started, what I could do is actually go back to my program and view my program versus actual. So this is actually going to show me my department, what was programmed, and what I actually have in my design. So for my private, semi-private room, patient room, my program asks for 17. In my design, I actually have 17. So you'll start to see that it shows you each item that was placed in the design in the specific area for those items. In my patient room private, I actually had to start to manipulate those individual rooms. So now the sizes actually differ due to design or structural columns that might interfere with the room, or anything that we run into daily when we're doing design. Affinity also will highlight where your program and design differ. So in the medication room, my program asks for 2 at 300 square feet each. In my design, I actually have 3. So it's showing me that I'm over by 1. So it's giving me a red highlight just to warn me that I I went outside of my program by adding more spaces than what was required. If I had less spaces, it will give me a negative number in my difference column so that I could quickly start to see the differences between what was programmed and what was actually designed. This validation isn't only done at the early aspects of Affinity. Because we have a bidirectional link with our production tools, with Revit, ArchiCAD, and EcoSim, because we have that bidirectional link, as you go through DDs and CDs and even CA, and you manipulate the design, you massage the plans, you change things around, because of that bidirectional link, you can push your design back into Affinity to update the Affinity design, which will ultimately compare back to the original program. So as that design manifests and changes, the changes actually show up in this comparison or this validation, so that you always have the idea of what your original program was and where your design is in relationship to that at this point in time. In this example, you can also start to set up your trends. For instance, for this med surgery unit, my grossing factor was 60% when I did my programming. So it actually, pushed my grossing area up to almost 55,000 square feet. Once the design was done, my total design was only, a little less than 50,000 square feet. So I can quickly see that there's that difference of over 5,000 square feet between what was programmed and what, my designers actually laid out. This actually gives you the ability to determine how trends are changing. So based off your designers and how efficient they were in laying out spaces and corridors, you can now start to go in and change your grossing factor to maybe 45%. So now you see that your program numbers and your design numbers almost match identically. Yeah, that sounds right. At this point, you can actually save this information back into your template for future use, and then that gives you the ability to update your template and keep your template up to par with how your designers work and the trends, how they change over the years. All right. This was just a couple, of the tips and tricks or, quick aspects of Affinity and how it helps with these massive programs that we have when we're working with healthcare facilities. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to type them in right now, and I will go through the questions and start to answer them. Okay, here's the first question. If a client gives us program data in a questionnaire or spreadsheet, is there a way to bring that into Affinity? Yes. There's multiple ways of getting information into Affinity. One way was what we did today, where we created our program within Affinity. There's also where we can, convert an Excel spreadsheet into a CSV format and import that in. We also have where we can create Excel workbooks for your clients to fill in the information, and then you can import that in. Or we could do flash-based questionnaires where you put it on your website, send it to your clients, they fill in the information, and then you import that into Affinity. All right, let me see if there's another question. Can you program the size of a space based on capacity, the number of staff or people using a room? Yes. We actually have capacity-based targets when you're creating your program. So if I'm adding another room to patient care, there's actually a target pull down where we could base it off the quantity of rooms we want, the area capacity, which, we want 500 people at 15 square feet per person, that type of thing. There's also where you could start to do conditional quantities in areas. That's where you actually base this item off other items within your program. So you might need one nurse station for every 5 patient rooms or something like that. So it gives you the ability to actually, create your program items based off of multiple items within your program already. So yes. Let's see. If we have our own equipment, object graphic files, can we use those in Affinity? Yes. If you have objects, you can actually create objects within Affinity and apply your graphics to that file. So the graphics that you have will, overlay the object so that we see your graphics when we look at that item within Affinity. We also have where you can bring families from Revit into Affinity to create your objects. Can you drag and drop departments into the design? Yes, you can drag and drop your departments into the design if you want to. Some people actually prefer to do design by bringing in their departments first. So instead of bringing in the individual rooms, what they'll do is actually start to bring in either the major departments or sub-departments first, and then they'll start to do their stacking diagrams to see if the size of these departments actually fit onto the floor plates. And then once they've figured out, which levels each of these departments will reside on, then they go in and start to do their individual rooms on top of that. All right, next question is, do you need to have a template to start programming? No, you don't have to have a full-blown template to start programming. Affinity comes out of the box with some generic templates. You can use those templates to start your first project. And as you're doing your project, you can actually start to save information into that template so that you build up your template while you're doing your project. Does everyone have the ability to change the template, or can you lock it so only a few people change it? You have the ability to restrict your templates if you want to. We can store those templates where only a selected few have the ability to manipulate and change the templates. All right, next question is, does Affinity integrate with Kobe? Yes. We actually have the ability to import and export to Kobe, to and from Kobe, the Kobe format. When you actually export it, it'll create all the spreadsheets for the Kobe document. So the answer is yes. How does it integrate with Revit or Navisworks? At this point, we don't have a direct link with Navisworks. With Revit, the way that we integrate is that we're a plugin into Revit. So when you link your Affinity project with your Revit model, there's plugins, add-ins in the Revit ribbon of Affinity icons. You can actually import, we could pull in programs into Revit. We could bring in the design into Revit. We actually have where you can do your drag and drop directly in Revit. So you can see your program and actually drag the spaces directly into your levels on Revit. And since it's a bidirectional link, as you manipulate your Revit model, you ultimately can push that information back into Affinity to update the design. It also has where you can view the entire program or the details of a room directly from Revit without opening up Affinity. We have icons where you can look directly into the Affinity model. Let's see next. Can the database be replicated, used remotely, then synced with a primary file? I'm assuming we're talking about the template as the database, Greg. Yes, you can actually take the project file and the template, off-site or on-site, change information, and then update that information into your templates back at on your servers. When integrating with Revit, do you have to load all of the program information into the Revit file? No, you don't have to load all of the information to the Revit file. We can pull as much or as little data as we want to into Revit. You can actually map our properties to Revit parameters when you're syncing back and forth. You don't have to push the entire program at once. You can actually just bring in portions of the program or pieces by doing the drag and drop. And then our recommendation is that you only map over properties that you need in Revit. So things that you're going to schedule, you want to push over, because we don't want to make your Revit model too big. The Affinity database is 10 times smaller in size with 10 times the amount of information than a Revit file would be. So we only want to push into Revit what's needed in Revit, because we still have that window to view all of the information from Revit without actually pushing it in. Does Affinity produce room data sheets? Yes, actually Affinity does produce room data sheets. Since we're in Affinity, I can actually show you. This is something that I know a lot about. When I worked for an architecture firm, it took weeks to do a room data sheet, depending on the size of the program. Clipping an image, bringing that to Photoshop or something to put a background around it, or bring it in Word to add all of the information that you need. Affinity has a reporting aspect where you simply create the format of the report, and then you can come in here and run a report on anything within your program or your design or even in your Revit model. So I'll just do this conference room. But it actually starts to pull information that you need, any properties, however you have it, positioned, even, equipment list or a graphic of what that room looks like. We could quickly do an entire department, and this takes seconds rather than the hours or days it would take to pull all of this information using our standard way of creating room data books right now. Let's see. Will you be showing the links to Sketchup or Revit? The webinar is actually supposed to end at 2:15. If I have time, I'll open up Revit since everybody has a lot of Revit questions, and I'll show you some of that integration. Can it be integrated with BIM 360 or Artera? It's a possibility that we could integrate with BIM 360. I'm not sure about Artera. We're able to really integrate with all types of data and models. We can actually, get on a call later and we could discuss that further. Luce. Can you show us the steps to integrate the design diagram into Revit? Another Revit question. Okay, Artera is an FM system, SQL based. I'm pretty sure we can. We're actually working with a couple of FM tools for direct links right now. Affinity can also be SQL database, where you could pull all the information into a SQL database and use it. So I'm pretty sure we would be able to. All right. A lot of people want to see Revit, so I'm going to quickly show Revit. We got a couple minutes. If you guys give me a second, let me pull it up, and then I can show you guys. Alan, if you want to, we could set up a different call, and I could show you the link to Sketchup. Trying to see. We have a question, do you support Revit 2014? The answer is yes. Yes, we do. When Revit puts out its new release, by the time they release, we're already integrated with the new release and pretty much ready to deploy so that our integrations work together. All right. As you guys can see, I'm in Revit right now. I'm going to create a link between this new Revit model and my Affinity design. If you guys give me 1 second. What kind of information can you capture about a room in a program? For example, fixtures or finishes. Affinity allows you to capture as much information as you want to. All the properties can be customized, meaning you can create, custom properties. You can create, different finishes, the fixtures that are supposed to go into those rooms, door information. There's no limit on the information that you can capture when you're doing your programming. You can set up, HVAC properties. It's wide open to customize it however you need to get your task done. All right. So I'm actually going to bring over the design, or a design from Affinity. This is where Affinity gives you the ability to customize what you want to bring over. So I can actually map some of the properties to parameters in Revit. I'm pretty sure I passed that. All right. So I could actually map, properties to parameters when I do my sync. If they're named exactly the same, they'll automatically map for you. But this dialog box allows me to push over what information I want to. So I'm going to do a quick sync, get this started. And what this is actually doing is it's going through, the file that I linked to actually has 6 stories. So it's going through creating the six levels in Revit. It's creating walls, placing rooms inside of walls, and then in the cases where I actually use families from Revit in my design in Affinity, it's going through finding those families and placing those families in my model also. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes during this process. It usually takes, about, it really depends on the size of your project, but I think this one takes about 30 seconds to go through. So give it a couple of seconds and I'll show you guys the results. Okay, so it's finished. You'll notice that this is the design I came in. I can actually look at the 3D model. So what it did was it took all the rooms from my Affinity design, and now I have a design in Revit. So instead of starting from scratch, assuming something from paper or, having a throwaway schematic design model, I can now use that model to start my production model in Revit. So I could come in here. Let me go and annotate, tag these rooms. I could quickly start to tag the rooms. You'll notice for these conference rooms, I actually have some of the furniture from Revit. If I select a room, we can look over in the properties. You see that the ceiling finish came across from our database in Affinity. If I didn't map information across, I could still come here and say, show me the details of this room. And what that will do is actually open up a window into that Affinity file and show me all of the details that even the details we didn't map across. So all the floor finish information, security information, plumbing information, all that information now could be viewed by your Revit team without having to open up Affinity. They also have the ability to see equipment list. So even if it wasn't placed, it would show me what's supposed to be in the room. So now I could, manually start to add my furniture and my equipment in. Adjacencies, if there are adjacencies between 2 spaces, I can start to see those requirements here. So I know when I move a room, it'll quickly highlight and say, well, this room's supposed to be next to another room. So you have all that ability directly from Revit. I also have the ability to see the entire program. So I could open up the entire program. I could say, show me the program versus actual information, highlight where things don't meet. So as I move the design around in Revit, I just push that design back into Affinity, look at this table, and then I could quickly see the highlights of where my program and design aren't meeting anymore. If I didn't push the design over, I also had the ability to push the program in from Affinity. And what that would do is actually create a list of unplaced rooms, and then I would go in, draw my walls, and just drop the rooms that were created from the Affinity sync into my Revit model. So it would actually create the unplaced rooms, and then I would drop that into the design after I created the enclosed spaces or the enclosed regions. We also have where you can view the toolbar directly here in Revit. So I could come in here and see, quickly see rooms that are missing. So in my program, I must have asked for 5. I only have 4 in my design, so I have a -1 of conference rooms placed. Same thing for copy facts. I can quickly come in here and actually drag those into my Revit model from this navigation pane. It comes in as a group, so I can move that group around. Then I could go in and I could place my walls or whatever I need to do to finish my design. So this is just a quick way to drag additional spaces into your Revit model if the program changed, after the fact or during the design process. You'll be able to view that program and see where those changes occur and then make those changes directly in Revit rather than going back into Affinity. You also have the ability to come in here and run the room data sheet from your Revit model. Oh, that doesn't look right. All right. I think I've actually manipulated my report so that it's not pulling the right graphic. But what I could do is actually select the room, run the Revit room data sheet, and what it will do is the graphic that we saw in the report would be a clip of the Revit model. So it would go and take a clip, 2 feet around the room and place that image in your document. So you'll start to see, if we've already placed, electrical outlets and stuff like that, or if we have floor patterns or anything like that within our Revit model, we'll be able to clip that and view that in our room data sheet. So it just automatically would do it for us. All right, let's see. Any other questions? Can I assign barcode or RFID numbers to the items? Yes. Yes, you can assign any information you want to our objects or our rooms. All it is adding a custom property to those items. Any other questions? Well, looks like we're over the time limit. I want to thank everyone for joining the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at Trelligence. You can go through sales@Trelligence. You can contact us through the link you got for the website, for the webinar. We'll be happy to get back with you on any questions you might have or set up demos or whatever you guys need. Thank you again.